At the end of every interview that we have for teacher candidates, we will say, "What questions do you have for us?" And they will always ask, "Well, what kind of support can I expect?" And we will always say, "Well, don't worry, we'll give you a mentor." But it's not real mentorship. I mean, it's support with the difficult kid or the field trip form or the grade card, but it isn't coaching. That's where partners like EdConnective step in. They provide observation and feedback with practice. That's real coaching. Their mission is to ensure that every student thrives by facilitating exceptional educator growth. So whether it's science of reading, whether it's leadership development, whether you're trying to build the best recruitment and retention efforts, check out edconnective.com. Hello and welcome to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. It's the podcast where we dive into the authentic stories of those navigating the complexities of leadership. And I'm your host, Peter Stiepleman. Today, we have the honor of welcoming a remarkable leader, Merle Horowitz, a leader who had 4 decades worth of looking through a lens of empathy and resilience in the pursuit of progress, or in her wise words, we're going to empathize, sympathize, and energize. She talks about the profound impact that mentors have on leaders, and she also talks about the challenges of cyberbullying in education. She draws her insights from all of these years of experience, and really, she also has done some groundbreaking research of her own, looking at the legal implications of digital communication and things like that during her tenure as a superintendent. And then she sort of takes us on this other journey and talks about facilities and inheriting a system where there was a priority put on football fields over facilities and really bringing her community together. And I'll tell you, it took 3 years. So you're going, oh my God. But it's really a great story. It's really inspiring, and I'm thrilled to invite her. So I'm Peter Stiepleman, and this is An Imperfect Leader. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Dr. Merle Horowitz is our guest. Dr. Horowitz has been a teacher and a district leader, and she retired as a superintendent in Marple, Newtown, Pennsylvania after serving 4 decades. And as superintendent, she led district-wide renovation projects to bring the district schools up to date with security and technology improvements, all of which they served as a catalyst to the transformation of the district's academic environment and staff and student morale. And in fact, this led to the schools in her district being awarded the Governor's Award for Excellence in Recognition of Student Achievement. Merle was named the recipient of the 2014 Pennsylvania Association of School Administrator Award for Leadership in Public Education. Merle, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you.
Merle, it is so nice to meet you. You and I have been corresponding for a few months now, and so I'm so glad that we got to finally do this. You have had such a distinguished career, and I was hoping to harvest some of your wisdom for our colleagues across the nation, especially women in leadership. As you have pointed out in your articles and in our conversations, the percentage of women serving as superintendents is relatively low, about 23%. And that's in contrast to the fact that women make up the majority of teachers, about 74%. And so you led Pennsylvania's Association of School Administrators Women's Caucus as its president. And so this question is really an important one, I think, and one that I hope that you'll provide us some insights, because this is one that sort of plagues us. Would you talk to the importance of providing support to women in leadership? And then would you also maybe talk about how that support might need to look different?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Peter. So aspiring leaders today are usually coming either out of the classroom or the central leadership of a school district, from curriculum office, HR, pupil services, etc., into what I will call the superintendency or assistant superintendency type positions. Aspiring leaders may be unaware of the complexity of a district-wide leadership position. And there are certain aspects of that complexity I want to talk about for women leaders, and then get to the importance of mentoring and providing support for female leaders, which will look very different from their male counterparts. So first of all, people need to understand why a school board hires district-wide leaders. What are they looking for? And first would be personal characteristics. Okay, and that can differ from male to female. They're looking for a change agent, someone who has done something in their career, very important, of value, so that they could bring other changes to a school district in need of change. And certainly the ability to be an instructional leader. So women coming out of classrooms typically aspire to be principals first, and then, but more elementary than middle school and high school. What's critically important is to understand curriculum, standards, instruction, and technology, the full gamut K to 12. And so I will often advise women who are aspiring to be principals that you can't just be an elementary principal if you wish to be a district-wide leader. You need some semblance of experience at the middle level, which is critical today with adolescents and their issues, and also at high school. Aspiring assistant supes and superintendents really need to have that K to 12 knowledge of curriculum, standards, instruction, and in our society now, technology. They also need an ability to communicate with stakeholders because the stakeholders are very different. Elementary staff and high school staff are radically different, have different beliefs about instruction in the classroom, curriculum, department level meetings. So somebody has to have the personality to communicate with all. And finally, the one piece that I find many principals don't have, and that's the ability to manage fiscal resources. And that could go from a district-wide budget, which is usually in the millions, to running transportation, which is an anomaly in itself, to buildings and grounds, which are things that most classroom teachers have no idea what's involved in that, other than it's a snow day and the snow has to be cleared from my playground and parking in order to get to work.
It's interesting you mentioned facilities, though. I would also say that the vast majority of one's community does not have children in the schools, and so they judge the schools just based on what they look like as
absolutely, and that is so true. You know, when I became a superintendent in 2005, the district had 15 superintendents in 10 years. Now that tells you something about a community. I was the lone woman to come in, in 2005. So there was skepticism from the community. Can a woman really lead a district like that? But when they heard the gamut of my experiences that I had served in 2 prior districts, I had taught elementary, middle. I'd been in charge of curriculum K to 12 and technology. They accepted that. So one interesting thing is there was a 2011 McKinsey report, you may have been familiar with it, that spoke that men are promoted based on potential, while women are promoted based on past accomplishments. And so for me, I knew I needed to bring light to the board of school directors and the community that interviewed me as to my past accomplishments would enable me to be a change agent in their district. So going back to women, in order to overcome barriers that women often face, they need to set themselves up for success. They need to select positions that normally lead to a superintendency or an assistant superintendency. And if you worked in the areas of CIT, curriculum instruction, technology, that's a good thing for women. When interviewing for a district-wide leadership position, women really need to know their audience, their district, and I will say do their homework. I tell many women in mentoring positions, please go to the district website. Please read everything you can about every school, every leadership position at the central staff, and that knowledge, which you would then bring to the interview situation.
I would also add, in these days, one has the opportunity to view or watch recorded board meetings, because if you have a board member who has a passion project or is very much tuned into certain aspects, so you watch a few of those meetings to get a sense of the kinds of questions that board members ask or the kinds of things that are important to them.
Oh yeah, and that takes me, Peter, to developing an entry plan, and that entry plan can literally be a result of watching board meetings or reading letters that the superintendent sends to the community, or reading principal statements on each of their respective websites to know what a district is all about. Women should plan their career wisely. They need to stay strong because literally only 24% of nation superintendents are women. And that waxes and wanes, maybe 22, 25, or 6. It has not changed much in the past decade. Now, you asked about support. How does the support need to look different for women? And it does because of the gender stereotypes that the role has perceived for males. It is different for women. Women leaders are expected to be strong and decisive, which they tend to be nice and nurturing, but they don't necessarily appear strong and decisive. While a male leader may be praised for a take charge attitude, a woman may be called bossy or abrasive for the same behavior. And so they need to balance that level, at least in an interview situation with school board or political leaders, to share that they can be strong and decisive.
Do they say things like, I'm not afraid to make a decision? Do they say that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. And I think aspiring leaders are not well aware of the gender role stereotypes that play into these perceptions of women. So they have to do research and not be naive about their particular district, but also their community. Women have to show a strong clarity of purpose. They have to know what they're doing and how it will advance the collective good of a school district in their role as a change agent. So now I want to get to the whole mentoring piece, which I think is very critical for women. So I've done a lot of mentoring myself, and I've encouraged in my Women's Caucus presidency the necessity to do mentoring. That mentor-mentee relationship can be an important part of the development for district-wide leadership, no matter what other experiences the mentee has had. And that relationship provides a safe context for broadening perspectives, taking risks, engaging in dialogue and reflective practice, examining assumptions, your own and others, and behaviors that over time possibly reframing the behaviors. So it's an excellent avenue for individualizing the professional development. And just as a district curriculum leader would establish professional development in in-service programs for teachers, it is needed for district leaders as well. In Pennsylvania, we have these county-based agencies called intermediate units. They themselves set up mentoring relationships. So of the 15, there were never more than 7 women out of the 15 in my IU. So if a new woman would come in, one of the current women leaders in that IU would be asked to mentor the rookie. Now, the history was ironic because if a woman did not succeed well in a district, they tended to be replaced by a male because there wasn't the trust in the woman, the female, that the board had hoped to.
Some of us call that confirmation bias, right?
Interesting.
Right? Because it says, and it's the same thing with leaders of color. It's, we knew it. We gave him a chance. He wasn't able to do it or she wasn't able to do it. And let's go to somebody is just a better fit for the district.
Yes, that's right. I knew as a woman coming in, I had a lot to prove. I needed mentorship. So I looked to women in Women's Caucus who I'd known. I looked to successful women in my region. So for myself, I set up a mentoring network. And then I shared that in my Women's Caucus leadership role, that all those women needed to be challenged to do that for others. As they had for themselves, they had to do for others. And I explained that mentors can empathize, sympathize, energize, provide real-time advice, at times critical situations, but it goes beyond those specific situations to provide a safe environment.
So let me ask you this question. Everything you've just described in terms of mentoring seems to be appropriate for both men and women. And it sounds like also that there's a difference in there somewhere. Is it that the mentor for women should also be women? Is that the big difference? Or
yes, I believe the mentor should be women. Where I find men have a stronger background, it could be in fiscal management, the need to renovate a building, the ability to look at the technology needs. Okay, sometimes men could have an engineering or a mathematical background and understand the fiscal realities of a district.
In my book and in the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's a dimension called the nested patterns. And that really is the muscle of an organization's work. It sort of speaks to how do we want to be together. And
Yes.
inside that dimension, there are terms. And you just mentioned them a moment ago. Empathy, right? So there's empathy and there's compassion. And empathy and compassion, I really believe they are essential traits. And I think that you agree. You said empathize, sympathize, and energize, which I love.
Yes.
And they happen to be an important part of an organization's culture. And sometimes there are factors that obstruct such efforts, and cyberbullying is one of them. And in 2014, you co-published an article on cyberbullying. You turned it into a book, Cyberbullying and Social Media Within Educational Institutions. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And in my conversations with superintendents all across the country, social media and cyberbullying are two major concerns coming out of the pandemic. And so I'm curious what your findings were 10 years ago, because now we're at a decade, and what advice you might have for school leaders still trying to get a handle on this rise of anxiety, this rise of depression among our teens and what they're experiencing. So what would you say to that?
Yes, and I'm happy to share my research and my passion. I'll just begin by sharing, as a district leader in the 90s, before I was a superintendent, I implemented bully prevention programs in my two prior districts. We used the Daniel Vayas bully prevention program. He was out of Norway, and it was one of those Colorado blueprint programs that I did. And they were so successful, I brought it to my school district in 2005. Then we were just beginning to hear about cyberbullying. Mostly it was bullying, coming out of the 90s and turn of the century. But with the way technology had spread, with the devices in the hands of students, teachers, employees, it was turning into cyberbullying. What was very interesting, part of the training for that bully prevention program was an audience assembly where you literally introduced in a role-playing manner how the bullying went. So I would have teachers role-playing it, like knocking a kid down, bullying the kid, one nice kid, a bystander, picking up the books and saying, I'm so sorry, this happened to you. All of a sudden, with the advent of cyberbullying, in these assemblies, I put together cyberbullying, what was happening. And it was fascinating to see the hands gradually going up as kids were beginning to share what they were experiencing with the cyberbullying. And so my findings 10 years ago are still very relevant today. Here are the major insights into my work. Cyberbullying in social media is one of the most complicated and difficult topics for K-12 and college educators. The proliferation of technology has caused incidents to occur with students, employees, and parents. The law is still evolving and will continue to evolve. Just last week, I saw the Supreme Court ruled on a social media case with school board members. I haven't fully read it yet, but it's still happening. The statutes are continually changing, both statewide and national. The courts are deciding cases more frequently. There are three compelling reasons that this topic meets our attention. Cyberbullying and social media is creating potentially serious and adverse effects on our children and youth. Kids who are cyberbullied are more likely to use alcohol and drugs, skip school, experience in-person bullying, be unwilling to attend school, receive poor grades, have lower self-esteem, and have more health problems. Cyberbullying disruptions during the school day, which frequently begin outside of the school day at home, but are carried inside, cut into valuable instructional time, add complexity to maintain school operations and safety, and can create costly legal issues for schools. How we understand and deal with this phenomenon now is establishing new practices, policies, and legal precedents, not to mention laying the groundwork for the future as technology and accompanying issues continue to change at a rapid pace.
It certainly seems to me schools that go phone free have absolutely recognized exactly what you've put into your findings 10 years ago, or what you discovered 10 years ago, and how they are still relevant today.
My work has expanded. Now, going up to the pandemic, which you said you were interested in, kids coming out. The social isolation of the pandemic in some ways led to significant mental health issues for students. And although cyberbullying sort of was kept at a status quo, it still happened because it was happening online. There wasn't the in-person bullying because kids weren't in school, but it was happening. And where it was most pervasive was youngsters who had special needs, those with different gender preferences, those of different minorities, and those sometimes of different religious faith. Those seem to be the four areas where students were cyberbullying, which caused significant mental health challenges for those students, for their families, even for the teachers who were facilitating hybrid learning, once we went back to the hybrid model, or even kids who were learning on a computer at home, they were beside themselves. And then you started to hear about depression and anxiety, which was affecting, as I had said earlier from my research, the ability to want to focus on school, to attend school, even to attend classes on a laptop at home, were all being affected. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy shared that we have a public health crisis in loneliness, isolation, and lack of connection. And he said technology has been a mixed blessing. There are three things that youth say about social media. It often makes them feel worse about themselves. They feel worse about their friendships, and they can't get off of it. They're like glued to their devices, even 2 o'clock in the morning.
How does the term an imperfect leader resonate for you?
Okay, so I have thought about this a lot. I don't think the desire to be perfect doesn't really exist. There are people very self-centered in education who think they're perfect. I could never think I'm perfect because I consider myself a lifelong learner. And in every position I've had through my 40-year career, I always wanted to feel comfortable with the imperfections that I faced and strive for a greater state of greater perfection in my roles. Especially when you enter a position like a superintendency, there's no way to know everything. And I think new experiences can frequently generate imperfect decisions, particularly when faced with a crisis. I will say 5 of them that I experienced that were critical crisis situations that I had no clue what to do with. One was a teacher with a DUI, suicide of a middle school student. Oh my God, unbelievable. A weapons case headed to an expulsion hearing. A drug case headed to an expulsion hearing. And finally, this was unbelievable. One of my bus drivers was charged with abuse of his own grandchild. And if you could imagine the repercussions of that for a parental community that he was driving their children on a bus. So those were 5 I just elucidated for you quickly that made me feel I was an imperfect leader and I needed to learn what to do to advise others and my staff. And I needed to work critically with my 9 school board directors because these were situations that they had never experienced either. So the most important goals of a leader in my eyes, to aim towards perfection, establish clear goals and objectives, to motivate followers and provide them with direction, and support team members in order for them to be successful.
And we'll be right back. Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of An Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest is Merle Horowitz, an author, a mentor, and a former superintendent in Marple, Newtown, Pennsylvania. And in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they had to make, and then we discuss it. So, Merle, what happened?
Okay. I come in as a new superintendent, and I arrived to finalize the construction of a $3 million new football field and track. And I go in to tour the facility, the high school, and my jaw drops open. How can a district spend $3 million on a sports field and a track and not attend to the needs of their high school? I saw a lack of infrastructure for needed technology, 50-year-old locker rooms sorely in need of renovation, need for more classroom spaces for learning, need for a larger cafeteria to accommodate a growing population, need for a better acoustical auditorium, need for a larger and more high technology library with classrooms and conference rooms as part of it. So what did I do? I took the school board president on a tour of everything that made my jaw drop. And then he and I offered a tour to other school board members. We had to do it during the day. We had to do it on a weekend because many were working people. So I had a clarity of purpose. I knew why I was doing what I was doing and how it would advance the collective good of the district.
Okay, so here you are, you're taking this sort of tour of the football field and recognizing that there is a disconnect here in terms of, and this happens quite a bit, where districts and district leaders are sort of forced to prioritize some of the athletic components as opposed to looking at some of the academic components or the arts components. And what you're looking for is, I need to have some balance here. This is a little bit out of whack. So it seems like you quickly recognized that there was a problem, and you began to remediate. And so I'm curious, what got overlooked? The
needs of staff, not just teachers, teacher assistants, cafeteria workers, custodial employees, band directors. They all had needs. Needs of students. What did they think about this 50-year-old facility where they were learning physics and chemistry in 50-year-old labs?
So are you saying that what got overlooked was not just that you recognized that there was this issue, but that you needed to expand to sort of harvest the wisdom of all these other stakeholders as a way to all recognize that this is a problem?
Yes. The district chose to hire what I'll call a construction manager who sat in a trailer all day once the board voted to do a project. But this construction manager needed much better communication skills. He was only talking to the principal. He wasn't talking to anyone else. And finally, the ideas and thoughts of the parental community. As you said, many taxpayers do not have children in schools. So not just parents, but tax-paying citizens needed a voice.
When you look back on relationships, what did you learn about relationships as you were experiencing this event? And I guess also, I'm curious about at what point in your career was this? Is this early on in your superintendency?
No, yes. So I became a superintendent in 2005, and I was through 2 5-year contracts till 2015 when I retired. This was almost immediately.
Okay. So you're a new superintendent, and so you're entering and you're sort of tasked with this facility project. And you immediately are looking through this lens of curriculum instruction and technology and the arts and recognizing there's a disconnect. And I'm curious, what did you learn about relationships?
I learned the importance of communicating progress to the school board, to my administrative team, who weren't even high school people, but people asked them, to my educational staff, to my students, to parents, to taxpayers, and last but not least, political leaders. I don't know about your experience as superintendent, but mine was a very politically oriented district. They had significant...
Think about being in a liberal town in Missouri, 30 minutes from the state capital. And you could probably extrapolate how political that job was.
And honestly, I didn't just interview with, constituencies from my school district. I had to interview with politicians. There had to be a political community group that had a focus session with me. And when one critical, I will just say frankly, leader of the Republican Party who ran the area was a lawyer and couldn't attend, he was in court, I had to have a one-on-one with him that night before the school board could do final interview. That's what happened. Okay.
What frustrated you?
That the politics influenced the school board's decision to raise taxes to fund the building renovation and new construction project. It took 3 years, Peter, for me to get this to happen. That school board president, 3 years. The board changed a little bit, not much, but the political leadership changed. And so we should have, you're going to ask me what should have been done differently. The board president should have taken the political leaders through this horrid 50-year-old building and showed them that there were old computer tables in showers. Students could not take a shower. There were curtains on toilets. No, there was no privacy to go to the bathroom. And those leaders should have been taken through this high school, and that would probably have helped their decision to raise taxes for the community.
I think you've been very diplomatic. Can I ask whether or not what was somewhat frustrating, to go back to that question before I ask what would you have done differently, is the fact that previous administrations, so we're not going to assign it to any one person, we'll say previous administrations, could have walked board members through the school and said, what do we want to create together? Yes, there is an interest in updating our football field. The community comes together. It is a place where everyone convenes once a week. Football is big in our communities. And when you walk through our schools, you can see there's a total need for us to do improvements because we don't want children having to be in these substandard environments. You can't learn. Morale is low. Teacher recruitment matters when it comes to, or retention matters when they see the kinds of facilities that are here and the opportunities to do things. And so is it appropriate to say that there was some frustration with previous decisions to prioritize football fields over the whole facility?
I will tell you this. My predecessor was a football coach from Western Pennsylvania. He was the previous superintendent. What does that tell you, Peter?
Okay. Well, I was trying to dance around it, and you went right for it. So
I had to be candid. Yep,
right? I wish there were a football metaphor. I think there is. Like you went straight up the middle. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then what could have been done differently? I think you've touched on it. What could have been done differently is that you could have brought everybody together, or previous administration could have brought board members together to say, what do we want to create together, and not forced your administration, the board that hired you and the board that sort of inherited this, to have to go 3 years of trying to convince the community and then having to.
Okay. My greatest frustration was needing to shelter the school district community, teachers, students, parents, employees, from the political reality. I could not say, I know the reason this is not moving forward. For 3 years, I had to dance. And I was so frustrated because I knew what was the right thing to do. I couldn't say to the parents who came to school board meetings, why aren't you starting this project? I bit my tongue and I let the board leadership dance around it, because they also could not say, these are the people that got them elected to the school board. They could not bludgeon them in public. But a lot of good came out of this. Everyone got on the same page. And I would say it was probably an 8-1 board vote to go ahead with the project. And I call it a building renovation / new construction, because we renovated so many aspects of the building, and we built a 6-room classroom addition that was spectacular. So high-tech, every teacher wanted to teach there. What came out of it? Significant pride in the high school and the entire school district. We now had a flagship high school. Tours were provided to parents and the greater tax-paying community, and they came. We opened the building on weeknights and weekends. We engaged stakeholders in meaningful dialogue. I fostered a culture of trust, collaboration, and shared responsibility. In the end, students, families, staff, and administrators became active participants in shaping the future trajectory of our educational system.
My guest today was Merle Horowitz, an author, a mentor, former superintendent in Marple, Newtown, Pennsylvania. And Merle, thank you so much for starting us out with the sort of technical roadmap to becoming a soup, and then what support looks like, whether it's fiscal management, curriculum instruction, encouraging one to do their homework, right? Watch meetings, read letters, all those types of things. Finding a mentor, that safe place to explore ideas. I love to empathize, to sympathize, and to energize and help individuals develop as leaders. And then thank you so much for then showing us how hard it is to navigate the highly political position of being a superintendent, and that sometimes, a delay, while tough, can absolutely yield better results for children. It was such an honor to spend time with you.
And it was a pleasure to be with you, Peter. Thank you so much.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created our artwork, a wood print-inspired Daruma doll butterfly. Remember, imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. And I'm proud to be an imperfect leader. I'm Peter Stiepleman. Please join me next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action. Imperfect leaders. Are you facing challenges filling open speech-language pathologist positions within your district? It's kind of a silly question because I know you are. Empath Speech understands the critical need for qualified professionals in your schools. They recognize that communication lies at the heart of academic success, and that's why they're dedicated to helping you bridge the gap by offering expert therapists and innovative telehealth solutions. Don't let open positions hinder your students' success. Partner with Empath Speech today and ensure every child in your district has access to the speech therapy they deserve. Empath Speech, EMPAT Speech.com. Empowering students, empowering schools.